May the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord, Creator, Redeemer, and Sustainer. Amen. Good morning. I never realized how important it is to think ahead until I spent my first winter here a few years ago as a Maine homeowner. I woke up one morning to discover that the power was out. And of course, the first thing I thought is, oh man, when I get out of bed, it's going to be really cold here. So what I did was I jumped out of bed. Yes, I literally jumped out of bed. And got my robe on really fast and my slippers. And I ran out to the kitchen to get a cup of water to get a cup to put water in so that I could have a nice hot cup of tea, only to discover, to my amazement, there was no water. There wasn't any water. I know, right? How weird is that? But you know what? I guess here's the thing. Well, and I've never had a well before, of course. I had no idea what happened with wells. I've only had city water. So you can imagine my surprise when I realized that, duh, without electricity, the well doesn't work. I'm not sure how I thought the water got into my sink without electricity. But you know, really when you think about it, how does city water get into your sink without electricity? You probably know the answer to that, but I don't. So there we go. So this last Monday, when we had that wind that was just whipping around the houses and everything, remember it sounded like hurricane force gale, like a horror movie or something like that. It was just horrible, and we thought trees were going to come down. So of course I went and got every single pail, every single bucket, and we filled them up with water. Because you know what, if nothing else, I learned fast, and I was going to be prepared this time. Because you know what happens? It's ironic. If I really prepare, nothing ever happens. It's when I don't prepare that I get in trouble. Now, in the gospel reading this morning, Jesus also seems to be talking about being prepared. It's a good habit to cultivate. I mean, it's the motto of the Boy Scouts, be prepared. And I think we all appreciate that it's good to be ready for anything. So here's what it said this morning. Jesus said, "Then the kingdom of heaven will be like this. 10 bridesmaids took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, 5 of them were wise. When the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them, but the wise took flasks of oil with their lamps. And as the bridegroom was delayed, all of them became drowsy and slept. But at midnight there was a shout, 'Look, here's the bridegroom, come out and meet him.' And then all the bridesmaids got up and trimmed their little lamps. And the foolish said to the wise, 'Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out.' But the wise replied, 'No, there will not be enough for you and for us. You'd better go to the dealers and get some more for yourselves.' And while they went to buy it, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went with him to the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later, the other bridesmaids came also, saying, 'Lord, Lord, open to us.' But he replied, 'Truly I tell you, I don't know you.'" Wow. We have hardcore Jesus again this morning. You know, sometimes when hardcore Jesus shows up in these readings, it makes me want to put hard questions to him, like, Jesus, aren't you the one who said that we are all supposed to share and share alike? Like if we have 2 cloaks, we take one off and we give it to the person that's next to us if they need it. Wasn't that you who said that? And wouldn't it seem to apply here too, Jesus, in this particular incidents that you're telling us about? But that doesn't seem to be Jesus's message here. So what is Jesus's message here? Well, this story is about what the kingdom of heaven is like. it is obviously a metaphor. Metaphors are a figure of speech, I should say, where something is regarded as symbolic of something else. So, like, for example, a really famous metaphor in Christian literature is, I am the good shepherd and I lay down my life for the sheep. It's such a good metaphor. Everyone knows that, right? But now Jesus is not really a shepherd. He doesn't sit on lonely hills and guard sheep. And, you know, for that matter, we are not really sheep. I like to think we're not sheep. In fact, we are not living in fields and getting sheared once a year. It isn't literally accurate. But metaphors are symbols. One word represents something else. And in Jesus' time, metaphors were considered one of the highest forms of speech. And so Jesus often speaks metaphorically, like in this story. But what does oil symbolize? What? How is this a metaphor for us today? Well, let's try this on for size. What if the oil is a metaphor for faith? And what is faith, you might ask? Well, Jesus, and probably all of his hearers who were good Jews, would have understood the Jewish understanding of faith. To them and to Jesus, faith had to have 3 components. I've told you this before. If you didn't get it before, maybe you should write it down this time. Just a suggestion. Anyway, the 3 parts are the capacity to trust in God, the courage to act on that trust with the expectation that God will meet us in our actions. Those are the 3 components of faith. The ability to trust, the capacity to act on that trust, understanding that God will meet us when we act. Yes. Now, faith wasn't so much a belief about something like, I believe this esoteric thing that I will now tell you. It wasn't that at all. It was how we acted, what things we did physically in response to our trust in God. Now, Jesus knows that we have to build up our faith by practicing, by acting out our trust in God. He might say, for example, if people can't see our faith by the things that we do and how we treat people, how do they know we have faith at all? And that might be a very good question. So, the bridesmaids are carrying their faith with them. Perhaps some know that faith isn't magical. It's not something that just like bing, zots you like a fairy godmother comes with her wand. Faith is something that has to be replenished regularly, has to be taken care of, or it'll run out. It could be that the other people there, the 5 foolish bridesmaids, were more interested in the end game, the wedding feast, than they were in making deposits regularly into their faith bank, so to speak. Perhaps the 5 see their faith as something that they have, whereas the other 5 see it as something they have to do. So they carry extra oil. Now, maybe the wise bridesmaids weren't being either selfish or unkind. It's just that what the foolish bridesmaids wanted was impossible for them to give them. Now, maybe the oil, our faith, think about this. We can't just scoop it out, our faith, and just hand it to somebody else for them to use. That's not possible. And while we may be able to share our beliefs, the things we think, with other people, it's hard to share how we act with other people. Can we, for example, sleep for someone else? Unless you know something I don't believe so, because I would have had people sleeping for me. Can we eat for them? Can we breathe for them? Now, while we can act on behalf of someone else, we can't act out someone else's faith. We can't live someone else's faith for them. And it's up to each of us to act out our own faith and replenish our own faith when it gets low. Because when the bridegroom arrives, I think we're going to want to be ready to go. We just need to be able to get up and go. I guess it's all about actions finally. I mean, how do we know a firefighter? How do we know that someone is a firefighter? We know because they put out fires. That's what they do. How do we know a cook? Can we tell a cook from somebody else? Yes, because they feed people. That's what they do. And how do we know a doctor? Because they save lives and help people and diagnose things. And how do we know a Christian? Because of what they do. Because they act in love. After all, if our beliefs aren't reflected in how we act, how will God know us? Amen.